Now, as you've been hearing already this lunchtime, Ryanair has lost its High Court action over government coronavirus measures affecting international air travel. The airline had challenged the legality of travel advice, claiming it was a form of legal restriction. We can talk now to Ryanair's Chief Executive, Eddy Wilson, who's on the line. A very good afternoon to you, Mr. Wilson.
Good afternoon, Brian.
Thanks for taking our call this afternoon. Now, what's your reaction to this judgment? Is it one you're going to appeal?
I think in a lot of these cases, this has been a particularly unique case where it's been heads we win, tails the government loses. Because the High Court clearly said today there's no legal requirement to restrict your movement. So there's no legal basis for it. And the government were pushing, or in the court case, we're talking about that it was purely advisory. And I think that's a complete surprise to the Irish nation, that all summer has been told that by government ministers at the highest level not to travel. And as it turns out, there was no legal basis for it, and it was just advisory. So I think it does clarify issues today, and we believe that the government should immediately adopt the European traffic light system, which would mean that there would be travel between Ireland and 15 other countries, including the largest economies of the UK, Germany, Italy and other countries, and they should get on with that because they've abandoned aviation throughout, since the 1st of July, when everybody else has returned to normal travel throughout Europe.
Isn't that exactly what the government intends to do? I think you had the opportunity to talk to Eamon Ryan, to the Minister for Transport yesterday. Yeah. What's your understanding of what the government's plans are in regard? That's their stated intention.
It's all too slow and too late. We had air travel demonised throughout the summer here. We're the only island nation in the European Union, and what has happened is that other European nations that have alternatives to air travel have been subsidising their airlines and their airports and preparing for what's going to happen in this downturn. We are uniquely locked up in Ireland here. We're down to 4 countries at the moment, one which nobody flies to and the other one that doesn't have an airport. They need to do something now. And they haven't done that at all. And, we now have aviation which supports 140,000 jobs and 325,000 jobs in tourism. And we need that action now. 2 things they can do, and we're seeing the start of it with the potential closure of Shannon and Cork. They need to adopt the European traffic light system without any restrictions for green and orange countries, and that will avert the closure of Shannon and Cork. And they need to take out the report that they've had for the last 3 months on supporting aviation so that Ireland can actually recover.
Well, in relation to your bases at Cork and Shannon, what's the timeline there? At what point will you be shutting down those bases if the government doesn't move in the direction you want?
Well, for winter 20, which starts on the 30th of October. And obviously we have, for the limited number of bookings that we have under EU 261, we have to give at least 15 days notice. So the EU Commission are meeting on the 13th of October, and we need the government to not only to adopt it on the 13th of October, but to come out today and say that Ireland is going to push for this traffic light system that will give stability and certainty so people can actually return to travel and restore connectivity in this country. Aviation has been abandoned here since the 1st of July. We are a sensible and responsible industry that deals with safety and risk assessments. We know what we're about. There is no scientific basis for restricting air travel at the moment. NEFIT have come out with this advice all summer blaming air travel, and we saw COVID rates in Ireland per 100,000 rise from about 6 or 7 to today at around 90.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with air travel whatsoever.
Yeah, but that is the context in which all of this has been considered. Rising COVID rates and the public health advice has been very clear. You might like it, you might agree with it.
Wrong. But the public health advice in relation to travel has been disproportionate and wrong. The European Centre for Disease Control has had rules on this since the 1st of July, and Ireland has gone off on a tangent on this. They blamed air travel throughout the summer, and they were wrong.
But you're not a public health expert. I don't have to be
a medical expert. I can tell you the numbers. The numbers were 5 or 6 during the summer, and it has risen to 90 today in Ireland, and it is not to do with air travel because there is nobody travelling.
And yet
the only countries that are open in Europe at the moment are Cyprus, Liechtenstein, and Finland and Latvia.
And yet it also seems, Eddy Wilson, as though Ryanair is quite hopeful, quite optimistic about the future for aviation. A report I see in the Irish Independent today saying that the airline is considering placing a huge order with Boeing for the 737 MAX aircraft, 16 billion euro worth of jets, which are considered being placed on order. So are you able to confirm that? And does that reflect Ryanair's view of what's coming down the track?
We've a current order with Boeing for 210 MAX aircraft, 135 of those firm orders and 75 options. We're working with Boeing at the moment to try, our priority is to get that order back into service, and we expect that to be in early 2021. The aircraft looks like it's going to return to service in the United States in the next number of weeks, and we will wait for the EASA approval. But believe me, our focus at the moment is with Boeing is on the current order and getting that safely back into service.
And what's your expectation? What are your projections in terms of recovery in air travel?
Well, the projections at the moment is that air travel looks like it will not recover to the same levels in 2019 until 2024. There is going to be massive contractions from some of the European carriers. They are being subsidised by their governments at the moment. An essential part of the infrastructure here in Ireland is controlled by two companies, ourselves and IAG Aer Lingus, and I think the Irish government takes that for granted. We don't have a national airline here anymore that is owned by the government, and we need the government to come out now, support aviation, put in the incentives for all airlines, get rid of these travel restrictions in line with the best scientific advice, which is not NEFID, it's actually the European Centre for Disease Control. It's what every other country in Europe does, and for some reason, the country that's most vulnerable to air travel being restricted is taking the advice from NEFID and not from the European, European experts.
Even aside from the NEFID and the public health advice, when do you think people, large numbers of people, most people will be comfortable and confident to engage in air travel again?
People will. The first thing you've got to do is to allow people to book with some certainty that they're going to be able to travel. And our experience was that, for example, in the UK, when they lifted travel restrictions on Portugal, that our bookings went through the roof the next day. People are reluctant to travel because they don't know whether what the restrictions are likely to be, when they're going to be withdrawn. We had the government in Ireland with no notice whatsoever, didn't even inform any of the airlines, and where they took Germany, Italy off the list, which are running currently with COVID rates at about 60% less than Ireland. And so people are reluctant to travel. And I think what will happen is that there will be there is a job for all of us to do in restoring confidence. We have had all the health measures that we introduced from the 1st of July. And everything to do with, less contact on board, and those hospital grade air filters that we have on board. And I think that's a job to do. But the first thing we got to do is that we've got to allow people to book with confidence.
Eddy Wilson, Chief Executive of Ryanair, thank you for talking to us.